Hi, and welcome to The Art of Film Funding. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with writer-producer Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding, and host of this show. Carol is the president of From the Heart Productions, a nonprofit organization that has supported filmmakers with the Roy W. Dean Grant, fiscal sponsorship, education, and resources for over 30 years. Carol also teaches the Learn Producing class. Each class features an industry expert guest instructor and is designed to give the information, guidance, and support to become a successful producer. You can learn more about this class and all of From the Heart Productions offerings at FromTheHeartProductions.com. Today we are joined by our guest host, filmmaker Heather Lenz, best known for directing and producing the Sundance documentary Kusama Infinity. Our special guest today is the award-winning documentary filmmaker Philip Shane. A few of his career-winning a few of his career highlights include co-directing, writing, and editing Being Elmo, which won the Special Jury Prize at the 2011 Sundance Film Festival. For his editing work on Dancing in Jaffa, which had its world premiere at the TriBeCa Film Festival, Shane won the Best Editing Award at Israel's DocAviv Film Festival. He worked at ABC News for nearly a decade and edited many distinguished long-form programs, including Ted Koppel's Iraq War documentary. Tip of the Spear, which won the DuPont Columbia Award for Broadcast Journalism, and Martin Luther King, Searching for the Promised Land, which won the Emmy Award for Outstanding Historical Program. Beyond filmmaking, Shane also produces and hosts the long-running podcast, What the If? Each week, he invites scientists, science historians, and journalists to show us how they would use real science to explore extraordinary imaginary scenarios. Shane has also become a regular speaker and consultant on the use of artificial intelligence in documentary filmmaking and beyond. Currently, he is directing and producing The World I Want to Live In, a feature documentary about the video game Myst, which is currently on display in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Recently, he directed and produced JADE DOSKOW, photographer of Lost Utopias, which will be discussed today.
Well, thank you so much, Claire, for the introduction, and thank you, Philip, for joining us today. I'd like to start by discussing your film about the photographer JADE DOSKOW. For anyone who hasn't seen it, can you please tell us what it's about?
Yeah, so JADE DOSKOW is a photographer in Brooklyn, and she's done a lot of work, both kind of you would call them landscapes and urban landscapes, as well as portrait work and other things. These days, she's a major photographer, does a lot of work with the New York Times, has done some incredible, the New York Times commissioned her, I think, to do studies of go all over New York City, photographing the changes to the city since Hurricane Sandy. She is also the only photographer, the sole photographer who has been appointed to document the 25-year transformation of Fresh Kills landfill into Fresh Kills Park, which is this gigantic area of Staten Island in New York City, an extraordinary place, and something I've done a little bit of filming with her there, but I hope to, document some of her work there too for a future film. Way back when, I'm trying to remember what year. It was in the was it around 2016, I think. I saw on Twitter back when it was just Twitter, that she was doing a Kickstarter. I actually saw it through a friend of mine, fellow filmmaker Gary Hustwit, who's made a incredible filmmaker, made Helvetica and a lot of other films. Anyway, he had retweeted this thing that this person was doing a photography project where they are setting out to go all over North America, photographing every one of the World's Fair grounds that remained from the World's Fairs going all the way back to the 1800s, whether something was there or not. And I just thought this is an extraordinary project. I love World's Fairs and things like that. So, and I was looking for a project to document looking for a project to do at that time. I particularly love my career has gravitated towards something I just absolutely love, which is portraits of people in particular, sometimes in science, sometimes in politics, but often in the arts. And sometimes they've been musicians, some well-known musicians I've worked with, and other things. So here was a photographer doing something amazing who was actually also in the same borough of the city. So I went out to meet her and asked if I could document her work, and so I did. Yeah.
Well, nice. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, I guess, how that first meeting happened, and also what it was like to be at her side as she took these photos and prepared for her gallery exhibition.
Yeah, it's interesting. Wow, I'd love to know what her perception of it was. I should ask her actually with first meeting me, but I think she had said something at some point like that it was much different than she imagined it would be. Like it was, I come out of the school of Maysles Films and Cinema Verite. So I started at Maysles Films in New York, and unfortunately, there were two brothers, the Maysles brothers. If you don't know them, look them up. But David Maysles, the older brother, had died some years before, but Albert Maysles was still there, and a lot of the people that worked there had worked on the Maysles films or were trained in the tradition of cinema verite. And so, part of that is being just, relating to people without artifice, just showing up and getting to know them as a person, and then being as unobtrusive as possible when you're filming. So I went out to her place in Red Hook, I think at the time. She had this studio, and where she lived with her young family, young son. And yeah, I mean, fortunately, she was into the idea. You don't know what people will think, but I think we found that we had somewhat similar attitudes towards the work, that we just wanted to share, sharing the creative process, I think was important to her as of course it was to me. So I think that just set us going. And then I just said, I will follow, whatever you do, I will try to follow within my budget, which wasn't very much. But we began right away. She was starting off by photographing places in New York City. There's a famous World's Fair grounds, as some may have seen in the movie Men in Black. It doubles as I forget, the headquarters for the bad guys or something like that. A Philip Johnson structure, the New York State Pavilion. And we set out filming. She set out photographing, and I set out filming her photographing in sub-zero, unbelievable freezing temperatures. But hey, it made for a beautiful. Actually, ends up being the opening scene. There was her just dragging all her equipment, and I'm not a tall person, and she's not nearly as tall as I am. So, and yet here she was trudging with this massive amount of these lenses and this camera, which her camera is one of these old-fashioned cameras, I think a 4x5, if I've got that correctly, with the kind of curtain that she puts over her head, the cover, and she gets under it and takes pictures. Looks like something out of the turn of the century. But yeah, it was really fun.
Well, I will say, for the indie filmmakers out there, it is smart to pick a subject that lives so close. So
Yeah,
they did
yeah,
have to raise money, obviously, for other travel, but that is a smart move. And
yeah.
I'm wondering, how long did you spend filming her, and how long did the documentary take to make?
That's a good question. How long I spent filming her? The number of days that I spent filming is probably only like 10 or 12. But they're over a long period of time. because I wanted to cover the full process. And like making films, her process takes a while, you know, so she would photograph all these films, but then it was a question of where would they be exhibited? And so we kept waiting for a place that might pick them up and show them. There was even one point where it looked like maybe the Queen's Museum of Art, which happened to be one of the World's Fair buildings in New York, was going to show it. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. Ultimately, she actually ended up deciding to publish a book. She got a book published of all her work. So then I followed her through that, and then the gallery show and the book signing, the book release. I filmed all these events, and then got to film her in the bookstore at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the book was on the shelves. And so that was really fun. So it was a few years at least. You can see her son starts out 5 years old, I believe, in the beginning. And by the end, he's got to be at least 8 or 9. Then by the time the editing took me a while for no good reason, other than it was, you know, I'm always working. And so this was my own project. And so I had to kind of squeeze it in. And I also found one thing. I will give a shout out to all the other indie filmmakers out there who may be making their first film. It really was one of my first films that I was making on my own, you know? And it just, as an editor, I've often seen editors asked, did you edit your own film? And they'll say, no way, I couldn't do that. And honestly, I have always thought, well, what a wimp. Come on. I mean, I'm an editor. I could cut my own film, that would be the dream come true. Well, it is, no, it's bloody terrifying to cut your footage that you shot and you're the only film, you know, it's all on you. So that honestly added to the part of the process. It was so difficult that finally I was able to push through and we got it done. So, I mean, at least 6 years probably over the total process.
That is something that I had planned to ask you about. You know, you're
Yeah.
obviously the super accomplished editor, award-winning editor,
Yeah.
and but you didn't edit the film. And so, as you mentioned, you did
Mm.
work with someone else. Did you start off trying to edit it and just feel like
Yes.
it was like too
Yes.
challenging? Uh-huh.
Yes, exactly. And then I got an amazing editor who had been a student of mine. So I teach at the New York Film Academy part-time, and I've done that for many years. It's a wonderful school. And it's a school that's largely international. I think 90% of the student body at the New York Film Academy comes from other countries. And I'd had many students, but one in particular, Anais Michel, was extraordinarily talented, both shooting, directing, and editing, but really a wonderful, wonderful editor. And yes, as I struggled with my editing, finally I realized this is not going to happen. And if I hired her, I could go back into more directing mode, which is actually something I was more comfortable with. And one of the things I said to her was, okay, do me a favor and just don't show me any of my really bad camera moves. You know? And I think I have to say, you know, honestly, when you work on highly professional things, like I'm on ABC News and the Maisels and stuff like that, and then you're used to that level of quality, I couldn't disconnect from that. You know, I thought I need to be as good as that. If it's not as good as that, then and so I was extra harsh. And Anais helped me in many, many ways. First of all, was a wonderful editor. I mean, really sensitive and really grasped, I think, the relationship between Jade and her work, but also Jade and her son and her husband and her family and the balance between those two. And just did a beautiful job. And she's wonderful with music and things like that too, but also worked with me. And many editors will tell you, and I can say as an editor too, that there's a psychological component of the editing job, which is working with the director and dealing with, frankly, their anxieties and trying to ease that is part of the job. And I'm grateful to her for having done a beautiful work on all counts. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it turned out great. So,
Yeah.
and I guess you touched on this a little bit, that this was your own film and you were doing other jobs. You didn't come out and say it, but presumably for money, and that
Yes.
this was a passion project. But could you about funding? I mean, was it entirely just on you? Like, did you do a crowd campaign? Did you win grants? How did that go?
This one, in spite of the fact that it did end up taking a while, I actually set out I knew I wanted to make my own films. And I actually started out with the sense of this is a starter film. I mean, I've in the past, I'd made some short, really, really short things. I'd made a number of short comedy films. I was with the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater for a while and did things there. But, you know, I was like, I'm going to I'm gonna just not. I could fund it myself because that's one of the reasons it would take a while, but I could manage it. And um, I kind of wanted to remove that from the equation and some other things. So and the fact that I did a short film intentionally because I thought, let me get my feet wet, so to speak, doing this. So that was really the main reason.
One question I would like to ask, we see in the film that she's such a perfectionist. She's like obsessing over like an eighth of an inch difference in the framing and stuff. Like,
Yes.
what was it like? You established this relationship with her. What was it like to show her the film? I mean, knowing she's such a perfectionist, was that, intimidating, or how did that go?
She was wonderfully supportive. I mean, I never felt any kind of intimidation whatsoever, nothing but support. I mean, I was, of course, nervous as you are before you show any film to anybody, especially if the person's in the film. One of the funniest critiques we got was she watched it, and I didn't ask her to do this, but wonderfully she decided to have the first screening of the film, nearly finished but not finished film, with her husband and her young son, like I said, at the time was maybe at that point maybe 6 or 7. And there's a funny scene that Anais had done a wonderful job on, where in the film, and her husband are putting pictures on the wall for a gallery show, and they're very highly perfectionist about it. Meanwhile, their son is running around like crazy in the gallery space and stepping on bubble wrap and making all kinds of a ruckus. And they're amazing. They're just like not fazed by it whatsoever. That's him. He's having a good time. He's a kid, whatever. So just that was wonderful. But Anais really had fun with almost the comedy of the boy kind of constantly interrupting things. And so you'd see him run across the camera, and then there'd be an interview with Jade, a moment, and then he would run across the camera again. And when it was over, she said, Benjamin, do you have any thoughts on the film? And he said, well, there's that one there's that one scene that's clearly about me being annoying. And I don't think it was a critique. It was just an observation, or it's a little bit of embarrassment on his part, but it was very sweet. But no, nothing but support on her part, which was great. And I must say, that's when you, as a verite editor or documentary editor in particular, you edit down people's interviews tremendously. You really do craft the things the sound bites, right, that they say, for instance, among the many other things. It's a huge amount of condensation for the person who lived the real life. And I always say, and Bob Eisenhart, who is who's an amazing editor, Oscar-winning editor, who was my mentor for many years at Maisels, would say, you've done it right when the person in the film doesn't say anything to you like, oh, that wasn't what I said, or that isn't what they just think, they just saw their life as it happened. So that's good.
Well, I love that you captured Jade as a creative woman, but also as a mother, like juggling
Yes.
these parts of her life. That was nice to see, especially because there aren't as many films about women artists as their male counterparts. So it's nice that you captured her. So
Yeah, I just want to add that another one of the I think I would have chosen Anais as the editor anyway, but I thought it was extra good. It was extra helpful to me that Anais is female, and she really, we agreed that the struggles which you get in the film, a little bit of struggles that Jade had in her career being a woman or a mother, with men and stuff like that, powerful men, and comes out a little bit in the story. And but again, Anais's perspective is another thing I think you want from your editors, to not just do a technical job, obviously, but to bring their own perspective is really helpful. So
yeah.
yeah.
We may have a technical issue. Claire, can you hear me?
I hear
I
you.
was muted,
Okay.
sorry.
All right, sorry. Okay, we'll carry on. Sorry, there was a freeze there.
Carry on.
Okay, so moving on. So the film about Jade, it's entirely shot in the present. As you said, it's a cinema verite
Mhm.
approach, and there's no archival footage in it. And so I'd really like to compare that to one of your earlier films that you worked on, Being Elmo, which
Mhm.
combines present day footage with some really terrific archival footage. I mean, I was
Mhm.
like amazed you had some of this archival stuff to use.
Yeah.
So, but for anyone who didn't see Being Elmo, could you just tell us what it's about?
Yeah, Being Elmo is about this little red guy on Sesame Street that you've probably heard of named Elmo. And it's really about the creation of Elmo and who's behind Elmo. Firstly, with Jim Henson and Frank Oz and Sesame Street, but then the story of Kevin Clash, this young puppeteer, this young African American puppeteer, or just person originally, just this boy from Baltimore who was obsessed with Sesame Street and puppetry when he was young and dedicated his life to it, and ultimately ends up on Sesame Street doing Elmo and creating probably one of the most famous puppets in history. So that, yeah, that's that. I must, for the archival, say that I give a shout out, as I always wanted to give a shout out to the producer director of the film, Connie Marks, who I've worked with for many years, and I'm working with again now. She and or her producing partner, Corinne Lapouque, who did an astounding amount of work on hunting down archival footage, both photographs and films, at some point found this episode of a show called Big Blue Marble that I remember growing up seeing as a kid. It may have been on PBS, I'm not sure. But anyway, they had done a whole episode on Kevin when he was like 17 and how he had become this young puppeteer. So that gave us an incredible amount of footage. Now, by the way, it's interesting, it's only 10 minutes, and you would swear watching the film that there's probably like 30 minutes of it in the film because we had to, spread it out throughout.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's amazing footage. I was like blown away you had it. And I have to say, this is just for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a super heartwarming film. But could you talk about the process of what it's like to build a documentary where you are building in this archival versus just staying in the present? Because even watching the Jade film, I thought, wow, this would be such a different film if, as an example, you had started building in archival of like the World's Fairs or whatever,
Yeah.
versus staying in the present.
I actually, by the way, with the Jade film, I did experiment in the early days with using archival and that kind of stuff, but ultimately decided, yeah, just like I wanted to stay in verite mode. If there's an immediacy to it and a personal intimacy to it that I like. But I love that you say staying in the present because, frankly, one of the things that I do, I don't know where I came up with this. This is one of those things I don't think was taught to me. It may have been taught to me and I forgot who taught it to me. So if I did, I forgive me. But at some point I said, as I'm working with interviews, and so I started when I was at ABC, I started out with Verite Film where you have some interviews, but not a lot. And then I went to ABC where I started editing more historical docs, like we did one about Martin Luther King. And so it was, your typical thing. We interviewed a lot of people who knew him, and there was some contemporary B-roll of places he had done his work. And then we had all this archival footage, right, from the 60s and stuff. And at some point, I decided that I would model. To me, the fiction film, frankly, is the gold standard. And I don't mean to demean documentaries in any way, but like, I would ask myself, if I'm going to cut this interview, what is, how do I use the fiction film as a model or something? And I realized that fiction film it really happens in the present. It's always in the present. That's one of the things that makes it so powerful, there are the occasional exception, but for the most part, that's how it is. And so when I go to cut interviews of somebody telling me something that happened in the past, I actually so I also studied and wrote a lot of screenplays in my early days. And in screenwriting, you learn to sort of write in this kind of, I don't know what the technical term is, but kind of in the present tense or this. And so I would cut the interview. So if somebody said to me, for instance, Kevin told me, I remember I was sitting in Jim Henson's waiting room, waiting to meet him for the first time for my job interview. I would edit that so that he said, I'm in Jim Henson's waiting room, so I make it the present tense, so that I could then show, we used animation in that case, some kind of illustration, right? Or you could show archival footage to make it feel like, so you're always in the present tense. And I also remove from any scene any sense of what would happen in the future, because I feel like the character, quote, wouldn't know what's going to happen. So when you interview somebody, they tend to jump all over the place. That's fine. They don't know why. They shouldn't. But you know, it's like he would have said, for instance, I was waiting, I was nervous, I was about to meet Jim. Now, in later years, you know, Jim and I would become friends, and we ended up doing this thing. I went to Disney World with him, and so I knew it was going to turn out fine. And what are they? Well, I just cut all that other stuff out, and I just say, I'm waiting, you know, and I'm scared, something like that. So keeping it in the present tense is very something I work like literally word by word to maintain a sense of that. And then you put pictures with it and music with it, and it keeps this tension going that I think is very, very powerful. So,
I've never heard anyone say this. It's super
huh,
interesting perspective from an editor. Yeah, that's great
yeah,
advice. And
yeah,
so going back to Elmo,
yeah.
how long did it take to edit the film?
So interestingly, Connie had when working with other editors, I was busy editing a film, a program about Einstein for the History Channel, and so I wasn't available, and she had other people editing for her for about 2 years. She had shot tons of verite footage of Kevin doing his work all over the world, all kinds of things that he does, and some interviews. With the sense of, again, she had approached it in that verite style. Connie also worked with the Maisels, and so, in fact, in an earlier time. So she approached it with that. It turned out, though, that you know every individual scene would make you cry because it was just so beautiful. It was Kevin working with kids or things like that, sometimes sick kids and things. Everyone was powerful, but there wasn't sort of a story carrying it through, and that made it really difficult. It was just sort of a string of footage. And so I came, she asked me if I could do anything to help. I tried working with the footage and realized immediately, I was like, yeah, this is not the editor's fault or anybody's fault. It's like, this is just a tough thing to do. And I was just coming off a biography, one of many biographies I've done over the years. And I said, you know, when I found myself, when I told people about this story, I told them Kevin's life, just like I just told you. He was this young boy who ended up, and I said, I think we should maybe let's interview him, get him to tell his life story and use that as the framing and turn it into more of a straight on biography. And she was like, that sounds great. And so we did that. And so because of that, we sort of, I don't want to say we started again, but I did a bunch of research to just get to know his whole life so that we could then write up new questions. And then we interviewed him again and did that. So technically, I would say it was about 3 years of editing. But you could say the second version of the film was about just over a year. And at one point, I brought in a second editor and then a third editor. Justin Weinstein, who's an amazing editor and producer of his own, came in to work with me, both on the writing and the editing. And then Konstantin Limpiris also came in and helped me out with the editing. So, yeah.
Now I know that you weren't a producer on this film, so you weren't the one responsible for raising the money, but since you've repeatedly talked about biographical films, which I also really love, could you just talk about some of the special challenges funding them? Because a lot of the big documentary funders will not fund biographical documentaries, even though they will put them in big festivals, they won't offer funding. Have you noticed that? And could you like talk a little bit about that? You know, because it seems like the funding is all for, quote unquote social issue films, even though there can be social issues baked into these biographical films. They're just not supported in the same way.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if part of it is to some degree, biographical films, especially about the arts or sports or, things like that, profiles of celebrities, for lack of a better term, or what I like to think of as, tremendously inspiring people. That's how I approach it. Nothing is easy by any means, but they can sell better than some other films. And so unfortunately, a social issue film may have a lot of trouble getting sold because it's political or whatever. It's going to be of interest to specific audiences for sure, and may raise funding in those areas. But I wonder if that's just part of it. I wonder if actually they're seen almost as too commercial in a way. So yeah,
That's an interesting take.
yeah, yeah.
Well, so the Jade film, as we mentioned, was a short, but Being Elmo was a feature. And I'm wondering if you could talk about the pros and cons of making a feature versus a short.
Yes, yes. Well, again, let's say that if the short, if your short was your total focus, it would also take a short time to be made. So the one of the reasons I do a podcast, so you mentioned in the beginning, I do a science podcast. And one of the reasons I do a podcast, I love science, and this just allows, I actually had a career in science a little bit before I switched into filmmaking, but it allows me to keep my toes in that area. But one of the reasons is a podcast is, as you know, recorded and done and up and posted and finished, within hours, let's say, maybe days at the most, a week at most, and on the other hand, you have features which take years to make. Now, I remember working on features and thinking, wow, I'm really taking a long time on this, or this project I'm a part of is taking a long time. We must be the slowest people ever. And then I, would go to film festivals, and I started listening to the opening remarks that the director would make before they showed the film. And usually one of the stats that they would give is how many years it's taken them to make the film. And I began to notice this, again, this might be the scientist in me, but I began to notice an average number coming up of 7 years from conception to completion. So I think that's a pretty fair way to go, which means there are some that get done in 2 years, but there are others that get done in much longer. I worked on an amazing film that's out now that everybody should see, called Sabbath Queen, directed by Sandy Dubowski. And I think Sandy spent more than 20 years making that film. Not every day, but but a lot of days, and a lot of editors. And it's an extraordinary film. So 7 years, is the thing. So that to me is the main difference. The other thing is a short. It's interesting because it's the difference between a short story and a novel. For anyone who's ever set out to learn writing or to write, it's a different structure, and it's not necessarily easier. There's an expression that something like, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. Right. So as we all know, whittling down, perfecting something, it takes a different time. So I would say those are the two main things. The other things are at the distribution end or the exhibition end, significantly different experiences. So with a short film, I caution everyone that the length of a short film seriously affects whether you'll get into festivals or not. Now, there's a question now about how important are festivals compared to how they used to be. That's a whole nother topic. But nonetheless, let's say going to festivals, which I do think is a valuable experience for the filmmaker. Under 20 minutes in the United States is a good length. You may get in from 20 to 45 minutes. It'll still be counted as a short, but it's much harder to program. In Europe, it's a little bit more accepted. But anyway, you can get into, with shorts in general, you can get into a lot more festivals. With a feature, obviously, it's a much bigger commitment of time on the part of a programmer and a judge and an audience. Therefore, there are far fewer slots for features. That being said, nothing goes the psychological and philosophical depth to the philosophical depth that a feature does. I mean, it's a really powerful experience. So, yeah.
And so, as has come up, you have experience as a writer, a director, producer, and an editor. Could you talk about what you like least and best about each of these roles?
That's interesting. Let's see. Writer, I absolutely love it. I don't think I have anything to complain about being a writer, except it's hard to get that credit. That's a whole other thing. But anyway, a writer is a wonderful thing. Producer, for me, producer is really hard because I am, as they always say, there's the artist and there's the business person, right? And the truly successful person will kind of have an ability in both areas, and yet that's a really hard thing to do. So I find producing quite difficult, and I find it far from the creative aspect. When I went to Maisels, for instance, I was a production assistant, and where you're the lowest bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. But on the other hand, you get to do all kinds of jobs in all the departments. So one day your job is to work with the camera equipment, and another day you're painting the office, and another day you're buying the coffee for the office, and another day you're sitting in the edit room helping the editor do something. And so you get to learn all these different things. And then you see also sometimes you help the producers. And so I got to see all the different things that people did. And I remember saying to myself, okay, at some point I have to choose. I thought I should choose what I'm going to do. And it seemed to me that the editors were the ones who literally had their hands on the art. I mean, they had back in those days, it was film when I started, physically had the film in their hand. They were like touching the art. I was like, that's where I want to be. Whereas the producer he was way off in another room at a big desk and had an adding machine and stuff like that. So that's what I say about producer. Director is pretty great, especially during a director is pretty great because you can sit with incredibly talented people. First of all, you get to hire very talented people if you can afford them. If you, as the producer, work out the budget so that you can hire the talented people. But I mean, one of the greatest experiences I had was directing this Einstein documentary for History Channel. So I got to travel all over Europe with this incredible camera person, Erich Roland. And then back in, when we were editing, I got to work with the editors and the writer and all that kind of stuff. So directing is a pretty fun. That being said, I was jealous of the editor at times as I was directing. I was like, oh, he gets, I have to now go off and do other things, all these other miscellaneous things. I have to now have meetings and things like that, whereas the editor just gets to sit there and keep editing and having fun making beautiful work. So was that all the roles?
Yeah, that is true.
Okay.
The editor doesn't have to get the money for the editing to continue.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yes. So in addition to being an accomplished filmmaker, you're also super knowledgeable about AI as a tool for filmmakers.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could discuss some of the pros and cons of AI when it comes to documentary filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I must say, it's interesting because just my connection to it is that, like I said, I had this background in science, and I, worked with computers since I was a kid, and so I remember when I was at Maisels. In fact, I started there in 1992. In 1993, I was still working there, and everything was still on film. We were editing on Steenbecks, flatbeds, and with actual film and all that. And nonlinear editing had come out. And so the office manager or somebody at Maisels asked me and another friend there could we learn about this computer editing thing and figure out if they were to buy a computer, maybe they'll buy a computer, which one it should be. And so that was amazing. So me and Dan Partland, who was the equipment manager at the time, he's since become a multi Emmy Award winning executive producer. Anyway, we got to go try all the different editing systems. And we decided that Avid was the best one at the time, and that turned out to be a pretty good choice. Others have since come around, of course. But and then I ended up teaching, and I've always enjoyed teaching, but I ended up teaching all the editors there, all the film editors there, how to use this computer editing thing. And I saw a lot of fear, a lot of anger, some excitement, cut to today, and AI comes out, and I'm seeing, for me, it's a little bit of deja vu. So right away, I was like, great, this is another place I can sort of make a difference. I can help. And it's something I enjoy doing, which is helping people learn things. So I jumped into AI, learned all about it. It's super fun, but boy, is there a lot of, it's all amped up because it's happening much faster even. So I know even in our audience right now, I'm sure there's a wide range of emotions about the issue. And then you add documentary to it, and it almost seems counterintuitive to some people. Like, what the heck? AI is a terrible thing anyway. And then the last thing it has anything to do with is documentary because it's all made up, stuff like that. That being said, the simple answer in terms of how it can help documentaries right now, and we have just started. We've hardly seen any. I've yet to see a finished documentary that's gotten all the way to the end, because this is also new. So a lot of people are experimenting with AI, but we've yet to see a lot of things. Also, the broadcasters are leery of it because there's some copyright issues, obviously. So, however, just this week, even I'm starting to get literally today, a friend of mine who's an editor emailed me and said, "Oh, another editor friend, just had an interview, and they asked if they knew how to use AI because that was important." I have a friend who's a producer who's saying, "Can you recommend some editors who know how to use AI?" So it's really starting to become part of the process. All right. Cut to the chase. How can AI help documentaries in two ways? One, the chat bots, so like ChatGPT and Claude and others, can be very helpful, and I've used these a lot, in sort of helping you with outlining, brainstorming, all kinds of things like that, organization. They can help you with transcripts. If you're comfortable uploading transcripts, I'm actually not comfortable. If I have interviews with celebrities, I'm not going to put them on ChatGPT right now, but I can talk about things in general, Anyway, there's a lot. I teach many classes in that. The other area is, again, where it's a little bit of a no-brainer, is in documentaries, you have visualization. So there's the talking head, especially in interview-based like documentaries, let's say, right? Like we were talking about. So you've got the talking head interviews, and then what else are you going to show? And so, as anyone who makes documentaries knows, we kind of have about three tools in your toolkit. You've got B-roll, so you go shoot B-roll. Often in an abstract way, so it can kind of have a storytelling flavor too, not just like generic, like here's a shot of the outside of the prison, right? You might close up on the barbed wire and have a nice long. So anyway, B-roll. Then there's archival footage, so old footage of that prison, let's say, or something like that. And then you've got animation or illustration, so you can create different things. And especially if you have a story that somebody tells that's really vivid, and you don't want to a reenactment might be a fourth thing, that depending on the channel you're on or your style would be that kind of thing. So you could reenact it using illustration or whatever. Interestingly, with AI, you could do reenactments, because the unique thing about AI animation is that it can be photorealistic, right? It can be indistinguishable from reality, interestingly, and controversially, but also pretty amazing. So you could create reenactments in that way. So yeah, those are the main tools. And I would encourage everyone, no matter what your feelings are about it, I still would encourage you to go try it. All of them, all the AI sites you can try for free for a little bit, if not a lot, and get to know it, just so at least you know what it is. And as real storytellers are now starting to use AI, we're starting to see some AI short films and documentary style films that are like, wow, pretty amazing. So I think the next year is going to be pretty incredible in that. But there's a lot of legal issues too, and ethical issues to deal with. So.
Have you generated any footage in AI that just really blew your mind, that you were just super surprised by? And I'm also curious how you're using it in your own films right now.
Yeah, interestingly, I'm not using it in a film right now. One of the film, I'm making another film right now. In fact, a Sesame Street oriented film with Connie Marks. It's a portrait of the amazing Muppeteer. Her name is Leslie Carrera Rudolph, and she Muppeteers, as they say, Abby Cadabby on Sesame Street. And but this story, just AI doesn't feel right for this story, especially for many, many reasons. But one of the reasons is that everything about the Henson and Leslie's work is all handcrafted, and like that's really the thing. So, and fortunately, the film, we have a budget that's enough to accommodate a professional animator, which is amazing. So I'm glad we can do that. That being said, our animator hasn't done it, but what's going to happen is, I think professional animators are still going to stay employed, many of them anyway, and they're going to use AI, just like they use Photoshop and other things, because they're going to have a skill with it that the normal person doesn't have. It's just going to become the latest tool. Anyway, that being said, because I teach it a lot and I am fascinated with it, I've experimented a ton and I've made all kinds of things with it. And one thing that blew me away there's a lot of things that blew me away. One of the things that I did most recently was, so Midjourney, which is a site that makes illustrations, or stills, let's say, it didn't make video up until like a few weeks ago. And suddenly now they're making video as well. But I thought, what, for my classes, I wanted to show examples of documentaries, right? Like you said. So I thought, well, what's a documentary I could do where I don't have any issues with rights and things like that? I was like, oh, okay, well, suppose I was making a documentary about my childhood or something. Okay, now I own everything. And so when I was a kid, I used to, this is when I probably knew I was going to end up as an editor. I had a tape recorder when I was 8 years old. I asked for a tape recorder. Anyway, I used to make radio shows. And then later I burned that thing. I blew it up. I discovered that I had a model train set, and the model train set has a transformer where you can turn a dial and it makes the train go faster. So I thought, wow, I could hook that up to my tape recorder. And I did, and it made the tape go faster, which meant it slowed down my voice. And this is amazing. So I made all kinds of stories using all kinds of different voices. And then I realized that model train set, I can also turn the dial to the left and make the train go backwards. So I can make the tape go backwards. Now we're really talking, right? So I did that, and the smoke came out of the tape recorder. And that was the end of that. So eventually I got a little older, and I managed to buy from a friend a used reel-to-reel tape recorder that had 4 tracks. Anyway, I thought, let me use AI to kind of recreate the scene of me as a little kid with a reel-to-reel tape. And I tried to find a picture of me as a kid, and I didn't have one nearly as young as the age that I was doing that, but I found one. It was an old ID card. I gave it to I uploaded that picture of me to Midjourney. And then let's say in the picture, I'm like 13. And then I said, create an image of an 8-year, use this as a reference, create an image of this boy at 8 years old with a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And I thought, well, it's going to be okay. It's going to do something weird, and it was kind of eerie. Like, it came out right away. I was like, whoa, that totally looks like me. If you saw pictures of me at that age, that is what I look like. And it took me a little while to get the tape recorder looking right, but you could do that. And then now, because there's video with Midjourney, you just hit a button, animate, and suddenly the reels on the tape recorder start turning. And then I said, just this morning, I was typing things. I was like, musical notes come out of the tape recorder as the boy listens intently. And sure enough, they do. So the distance from the vision in your head to getting the vision on the screen is obscenely short. I mean, it's not easy. It takes some skill, and it takes a lot of do it again, because each time you re-roll it, as they say, you get a new version, you're closer to getting the one you want. But yeah, there's a lot of amazing stuff going on. I would just say, lastly, the one thing that's absolutely astounding, the most astounding thing, is Google released their video AI, which the most recent version is called VEO 3. And that generates not only little animations or photorealistic scenes with people in them, but it has sound. And so I actually, I have I'll give a shout out to, I have a weekly Zoom gathering for documentary filmmakers, or any filmmakers who are interested in AI. You can go to my website, philipshane.com, and click contact if you want to find out more to apply for that. But so I thought, we have about over 100 people in that group, which is great. Anyway, I thought I'll make a little promo for that. I'll make a little video that, so I typed in, my prompt was like a barista in a coffee shop making coffee as they look to the camera and invite people to come to AI Cafe. Now, I didn't give it the exact dialogue. I didn't say these words. I just said, and it generated over and over and over again, just one thing after another. A barista, every time it was a different looking barista. One, it's a guy with tattoos. It's a woman with a huge bun in her hair or whatever. It's a Sasquatch, and different things. And it makes up dialogue each time, and it's perfectly in sync, and it sounds right. And there's sound effects, the sound of, just a full audio thing. And then it'll also include music if you want. So VO3 is just like immediately changed. It was already a revolution. Now that's a revolution on the revolution. So yeah.
Well, great. So for anyone who wants to learn more about AI in film, they could obviously join this group that you have. Is there anything else you suggest? I mean, I know that you've taught some workshops and things.
Yeah, if you go to desktop-documentaries.com, I teach classes, in-depth classes. So I have a class there, a 4-session class. It's about 8 hours total. That is an overview of all the different AI that's available for filmmakers. I am currently teaching, I'm sorry, and all these classes are recorded. So if you happen to sign up while at the beginning of those classes, you can come join live. But we have an enormous number of people who actually just get the class as a recording. You get a transcript, you get some extra bonus materials and things like that. You also get we hand out some ethics guides from different sources just for some thoughts about that. But I'm currently teaching a course, a 3-session course on Midjourney, just on Midjourney. So covering all the different, every aspect of that. I'm not sure when this podcast goes up, but we have 2 sessions left. But anyway, again, if you go to desktop-documentaries, you can get the recording if the class is already passed. And yeah, and if you search for me, I've done a lot of talks on the D word. The D word, if you don't know about the D word, by the way, and you're a documentary filmmaker, d-word.com. It's kind of a community website for documentary filmmakers. I've done some talks there that are up on YouTube that are actually the most popular YouTube things I think they've ever posted. I don't take credit for that. That's just the robots. People want to know about robots, so they sign up for that. But yeah, and if you go to my website, you can contact me and find out about anything else that's coming up. So.
Well, for anyone who wants to follow your career, could you please share your social media handles and also just remind us of your website again?
Sure. The website is Philip Shane. That's Philip with 1 L, because that's all my parents could afford. I've carried that joke around for 40 years. Philip Shane, SHANE.com. And yeah, you can find all kinds of stuff there, and you can contact me through that. I am also on LinkedIn, Philip Shane, or Philip A. Shane, if you don't find me that way. And I'm on Facebook, I guess. I'm on all the various things, mostly as Philip A. Shane, both Instagram and all that kind of stuff.
Well, great. And for anyone who would like to see the JADE DOSKOW film who hasn't seen it yet, or Being Elmo, could you, I know you've made a ton of films, but those are the ones.
Yeah.
Could you tell us where are those streaming or playing right now?
Yeah, Being Elmo, I'm not sure exactly, but I believe it's on most, if not all, the streaming services. It was on Netflix for years and years and years. But interestingly, Netflix, after a certain time, actually like sort of changes up their roster of what's available. But I'm quite sure it's on Apple and Amazon and all the other things. The Jade Doskow film, by the way, I had not had it. I'd always intended to put it on YouTube. Oh, did you lose me?
Oh, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, good. The Jade Doskow film, I had always intended to put it on YouTube, but hadn't yet. This is a whole nother saga or a story of trying to get your films out there. So we had screenings, and I tried to see if that could be a financially sustainable thing. And yes and no, somewhat. We had a lot of great screenings, both virtual and in person. But eventually it's like, I really want people to see it. And so you've given me the impetus to say, look, let me just get it out there. So it's up on YouTube. Again, Philip A. Shane. Let me check that. What am I called? But yes, so it's on YouTube, and Philip A. Shane, yeah, on YouTube at Philip A. Shane. You can find my channel there. And there's some other stuff there too, some short comedies I've done and things. And also you will find there, I maintain a bunch of playlists because I'm just devouring news about AI left and right for filmmakers. So I've created a bunch of different playlists. So you'll see there, for instance, AI tutorials, AI news, AI discussions. A ton of a curated collection, so to speak, of videos, videos there that you can watch.
You know what would be so cool is if at all of these World Fair sites like the Space Needle and the Eiffel
Yeah.
Tower, there was like a little like a video player that the people standing there could, like when you go into a museum and there's a show about an artist, there's like a little room where you watch the video about the artist. It'd be so cool if there was like a little I don't know, digital device or something where someone could go watch it. But I guess
Well, no, it's interesting is that I must mention, by the way, that what you just mentioned, the little room with the video in it before you see the show, that specific thing was the total inspiration for my ultimately making the kind of films I make now. Because as a kid, I remember going to the museum and sitting and I always thought the coolest part was the movie ahead of time. You saw the artist in his studio. I remember seeing a film about Noguchi sculpting something, right? And then you went into the gallery and you saw the work. And I love those films. And I must say, thank goodness we have actually had a number of gallery shows and exhibits where they have shown the Jade film or samples of it in the room, which
And
is
did
pretty
you
cool.
grow up in New York where you were going to museums and having that experience?
Actually, I grew up in Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C. And so I went to the Smithsonian all
Uh,
the time. Yeah, yeah,
nice, nice. Well, that's a beautiful museum.
yeah.
What advice would you give to any first-time filmmakers who are listening?
Watch movies. That might seem like a corny old man one thing to say, but like watch movies and get to understand them. I was fortunate enough to I went to undergrad at University of Maryland, and I took film production there, and that was cool. And then I went to NYU, and because I had already done film production, instead I took cinema studies, which is where we studied film history and film theory. And I dare say that film history and film theory, where essentially we just watched tons and tons of movies and analyzed them very, very closely, sometimes frame by frame, um, was as valuable, if not more valuable. I think Martin Scorsese has said that if you want to be a great filmmaker, you should get an English degree. You should be an English major, study literature. And actually, the other thing he would say is study life. But I think that's part of it. The other thing is the amount of tools that people have today is ridiculous. Adding AI to the mix. I mean, so I think there's no need to wait for permission from somebody else. There's no need to be hired by somebody else. Yes, you need to work to get and to have a living. So do that as you need. But if you want to be a filmmaker, don't wait. Just start playing with this stuff. And I think the last thing I would just add to that is find a community of other people who are doing it. That really makes a difference. So and obviously online you can do that, but also in person is really helpful. So find the group in your area as well as find groups online who are like-minded people who are also experimenting with stuff. Yeah.
And is there anything else you'd like to add that I haven't already asked you about? I know you're working on just, numerous projects, and as mentioned in your bio, you're working on a documentary about the video game Myst. Is there anything else you want to quickly share with us before we wrap up?
No, just if you want to find out about the video game Myst, go to the Myst. This is one word, the Myst, MYST documentary.com. and that's the website there. And that's an exciting project. If you know the game, you're smiling right now, so that's great. No, other than I would say these are difficult times, and some people have feared that. Oh, can you hear me now? Yeah. Some people have feared that, basically in the politics of today, where the arts are being restricted or not getting the support that they used to, that this is the end of things, or they despair about that. The first thing I could say is, unfortunately, this is not the only time that's happened. I remember living through the age of Ronald Reagan and some others, where the council, what is it? Anyway, the grants were drying up, that PBS was being attacked and things like that. The other thing I would say is that it's in times like these where, let's say, the arts are under attack, not to mention human rights are under attack, that the arts, and especially documentaries, are more important than ever. So, if you're looking for a way to sort of feel better about the times, you might be, see if you can make a little piece for social media, let alone something longer, or become a part of some longer project. There's always, this is kind of crazy, but like, I remember learning about World War II. And at one point I learned about there was a filmmaking group. I forget. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. I forget what it was called. There was some filmmaking group in Hollywood where all these famous filmmakers, right, like Frank Capra and all these others became a part of this group, and they set out to make films, supporting the Allies, and both documentaries and propaganda pieces, right? And I always thought, if I was ever in World War II, or God forbid World War III, that's what I would do. I would join the filmmaking brigade. So there's plenty of opportunities for that today. But lastly, it doesn't mean that the need to simply entertain, frankly, or to portray simple human truths hasn't left. Again, I would almost say that's almost more important than ever. One of the things documentary can do, actually, and fiction, and one thing the arts can do is portray and celebrate nuance. And if anything is under attack these days, it's nuance, subtlety, compassion, things like that. So whatever it is that's the subject of your film, I think take pride in it and keep going.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you for all of the wisdom you shared. It's really been just fantastic to have you today. And we're really grateful. So yeah, thank you so much, Philip.
Thank you, Heather.
All
Thank
right.
you all.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Now, in its second edition, Carol Dean's popular book, The Art of Film Funding, has 12 new chapters to cover all areas of film financing and how to avoid expensive pitfalls. Learn how to start with an idea and end with a trailer, how to make an ask for money, create your story structure and your trailer, legal advice, fair use, successful crowdfunding, how to ask for music rights, and what insurance you can't shoot without. Available on Amazon under Carol Dean and at FromTheHeartProductions.com. I want to remind our listeners that David Raiklin is a brilliant and talented award-winning musician who scores films and can compose music for a trio or for a full orchestra. David is a very good friend to the independent filmmaker and comes highly recommended by From the Heart Productions. If you need music to help tell your story, please contact him at davidraiklin.com. That's David, RAIKLEN.com. And Carol and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Art of Film Funding. Please visit our website at FromTheHeartProductions.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with your films, everyone.